told you before, I'm kind of a type A Buddhist. And I went to the National Ministers meeting in Sacramento Tuesday, Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday was the National Council meeting for temples. And so there was 50 ministers there, and we're all on the Nijing, and we got a show together. But because I'm type A, I always come up way too quick. So everybody bends over, and then I'm impatient, I hop up, and everybody's still bowing. So I really had to concentrate, don't go up, don't go up. It really hasn't been 3 minutes, it's only been 3 seconds. So I worked on that a lot in Sacramento. And then the other thing, I've been looking for a quote. I finally found it. I probably was doing this during the National Council meeting. There's a lot of Robert's Rules of Order, and there's a lot of parliamentarian things going on, and I don't know, there's firsts and seconds, and I lost focus once in a while and started studying Buddhism. But I've always thrown around this quote that there are, Jesus taught from, I've heard as little as 1.5 years up to 3 years, Jesus taught. And when I was a young kid and I finally cracked open the Bible, I was a little surprised and slightly disappointed that the 40 Gospels is, relatively thin. And I was 12 or 13 and I thought, wow, all of Christianity is based on these 50 pages? I thought there'd be more. Because the Bible's way bigger than just that little section. There's a lot of letters, there's a lot of padding in there. But we have the opposite problem in Buddhism. The Buddha taught from 35 to 80. And so, that's 45 years. So we've got kind of the opposite problem. We've got too much. Our canon is too big. It's too large. And I thought I read a quote that said it was 500,000 words. And then I thought, no, maybe it was 500,000 lines. So I went on the internet yesterday and I was Googling around. And I'm pretty good at, you have to really figure out what words to seed the Google search with, right? And there's, you can search for something a lot of different ways, but if you pick the right 3 words, it instantly comes up. So I found it. It was Jan Nadir. She's a woman scholar from, I think, Indiana State. It's one of those vowel states that you fly over. I think it was Indiana. It doesn't really matter. She's greater than the university she teaches at. She's internationally known. Her reputation is far beyond Indiana State. She's a really wonderful scholar. I think she's in her 50s or 40s. She's an incredible scholar. And I found the quote. I have it on my iPhone. She said that if you take just the Chinese canon, and I'm a bad speller. I always spell canon C-A-N-N-O-N. It's not that kind of a canon. People always correct me. There's one N. Canon is not something that shoots, giant metal balls at people. It's a collection of the writings. And so there's a Buddhist canon in Tibetan language. There's a canon in China, and there's one in Japan. And I think the one in Japan is even larger. But she said if you look at the Chinese canon alone for Mahayana Buddhism, she said it's 500,000 pages. And I got my iPhone out, and I think you'd have to read, I think it was 10,000 pages a year for 50 years. Or no, is it 100,000 pages? It's beyond comprehension. So there's an awful lot of texts out there that we couldn't ever possibly read. And there's a lot of people quoting the Buddha, a lot. And sometimes I'm a little suspicious of the quotes. I looked this up. I had a physics professor. I did this at the council too. I had a physics professor at El Camino College in Torrance named Professor Tom Wilson. And he taught from 1950 to 1995. I took him in the 80s. And where was I headed with this? All right, I don't know why I brought that up. But I don't know why I brought up that. There must be some really good thing behind that. But anyway, there's a lot of different quotes running around on the internet. And it's very hard to track them down. And even when you write papers, a lot of the quotes that are supposed to be by Mark Twain or by Albert Einstein or by Mother Teresa, it turns out they never said it. It happens a lot. So like when you write a paper, you want to give credit, but a lot of times that's not the person who said it. It's kind of an urban legend. So I wanted to show you some of this. There's a website on the internet called Fake Buddhist Quotes. So this is actually from their website, Fake Buddha Quotes. And this was one of the images I found was, I can't believe it's not Buddha. There used to be commercials like this, I can't believe it's not butter.
Oh, yeah.
So I went and I Googled Buddha quotes by the Buddha, and this one came up. One of them is, oh, I know what I was going to tell you about Mr. Wilson. All right, here we go. No, I remember what it is now. That was going to drive me crazy. I took Professor Tom Wilson, and he was a very difficult physics teacher. And once in a while, he would give us multiple choice questions on a test, along with math problems. And you know, the secret of taking multiple choice is to weed out the two that you think are obviously wrong, and then maybe guess on the last two. And that really helps your chances a lot. But I understood him, and I listened to him so closely that I could almost tell that a question was false or not, or whether a choice was bogus, because he just never talked like that, right? It didn't ring true. Like I would close my eyes and I would picture him in my head saying that, and I'd be like, that doesn't sound like his voice. That doesn't sound like something he would say. So I ended up getting a lot of the ones that rather than guessing, when I had two left, I just picked the one that sounded like something he would have said. And it was really accurate. So this happens with the Buddha a lot now. I've read enough that I get the suspicion that I'm not sure if he said that or not. So this is one of the ones. The trouble is, you think you have time. It's a really good quote. It's very meaningful. It doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard the Buddha say before. And if you go to this website, fake, fake. He never said that. It's fake. So there's these all over the internet too.
Is that a true statement by Buddha?
Yeah, there'd be another one that said, I never said I didn't say it. This is another one. This is actually called Gautama quotes. The thought manifests as the world, as the word. The word manifests as the deed. The deed develops into a habit, and the habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. So I don't know if you remember this or not, but this is a version of a quote I used in one of my classes. And I tried to track it down, and nobody knows who said it. So this is like it's like they've taken a quote that you can't attribute. It developed in the 1800s. They have an idea of who might have said it, but they're not really sure. But they kind of retooled that, placed it in the Buddha's mouth, and hey, it's not true. So this would be a good game show, don't you think? Did the Buddha say it? I'll take. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit. There was a group or a clan of people during the Buddha's time called the Kalamas tribe or clan. And it said in the sutras that they were a little bit cynical, wary. They were suspicious in general, and they were confused, very confused. And the reason why is because there were so many different teachers at this time that they didn't really know who to listen to and who to follow. And so it's a little bit like today, if you have Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle, Tony Robbins, Oprah Winfrey, Deepak Chopra, you have all these celebrities, and it happens a lot on, like I think, I was sick last week with a head cold. It was a National Council head cold. But I got home from the National Council and I had a head cold, and I watched daytime TV. And all the celebrities write self-help books. You know, they always come on and they're promoting. So you have all these celebrities as well, you know, how to eat healthy, how to do yoga. And so it is a little overwhelming. And if you go to Barnes & Noble, I heard about this, but I'd never seen it in person. the self-help aisles at Barnes & Noble is just overwhelming. It's just stacks and stacks of books. And anyway, so the Buddha goes and talks to the calamus, and he basically says something like, don't trust me just because of who I am. Like, don't trust me just because of my reputation or because I'm called the Buddha. He said, you need to practice, and you need to experience Buddhism, and you need to judge for yourself. So he's talking about experientiality, not having blind faith. But this quote has been taken out of context and massaged a little bit, and sometimes it's used as a justification and a proof that the Buddha was proposing the scientific method. You know, that you should only trust Buddhism if it kind of conforms with observable facts or with your opinions, and it's a lot more subtle than that. So this is one of those quotes that has been peeled off this Kalama Sutra. Doubt everything, find your own light. So this is appealing because it's very individualistic, and you can kind of make up your own religion and create your own spirituality. But he didn't say that. So here's another one. Believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who said it, no matter if I have said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense. So, this is kind of a popular quote too, because it's it kind of confirms what you already believe. Like if it's familiar to you, and it kind of supports your philosophy of life, then maybe you would accept it. So he didn't say that. So here's another version of the quote. Do not believe in anything simply because you have read it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found written in your religious books. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teachers and elders. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducted to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. And some of these had cuss words in them, and I couldn't use them. So I wanted to show you this person. He wrote an article called Lost in Quotation, kind of a play on Lost in Translation. And it's by Thanissaro Bhikkhu. So we've talked about this before. Bhikkhu is the Indian word for monk. So he's a monk. And it was written in either a magazine or on the internet, Access to Insight, August 29th, 2012. So this Kalama Sutra, I really thought it was a justification for logic, reason, and scientific method. And Buddhism needs to somehow confirm your beliefs. And in a lot of ways, Buddhism is the opposite of that, right? It challenges our beliefs. It's not depending solely on logic and reason. It's trying to get us to emotionally open our hearts. So in a lot of ways, this quote, it's appealing, but I think it's misleading. So this is from the monk. Many people who don't know much about old Buddhist texts often know one passage from the Pali Canon, the part of the Kalama Sutra stating that old texts can't be trusted. Quotes from this passage come in many shapes and sizes. Some of them are short sound bites. Like the message that was rubber stamped on the envelope of a letter I once received. Follow your own sense of right and wrong, the Buddha. There's also the desktop wallpaper. Believe nothing, no matter who said it, not even if I said it, if it doesn't fit in with your own reason and common sense. Even scholarly citations of the sutra give the same message. Here's the entire quote from the sutra in a recent book. When you know for yourselves that these things are wholesome, these things, when entered upon and undertaken, incline toward welfare and happiness, then, calamus, having come to them, you should stay with them. But if you look at the entire passage in the Kalama Sutra, you discover that these quotes give only part of the picture. The Buddha's skepticism towards reliable authorities extends inside as well as out. So in this case, Kalamas, don't go by reports, by legends, by traditions, by scripture, by logical deduction, by inference, by analogies, by agreement through pondering views, by probability, or by the thought. This contemplative is our teacher. Even when judging the results of your own actions, you can't simply take your own ideas of what works as a trustworthy standard. After all, you can easily side with your greed, aversion, or delusion, setting your standards too low. So to check against this tendency, the Buddha recommends that you also take into consideration the views of the wise, for you'll never grow until you allow your standards to be challenged by theirs. This is simply the way we have to operate when developing any kind of skill. Your appreciation of good carpentry, for example, grows as you master carpentry yourself. And the Buddha is making the point that this is how to approach the Dharma, as a skill to be mastered. As with any skill, your inner sensitivity and assurance as to who's truly wise in the skill grows only through your willingness to learn. So this is a much different interpretation than a kind of an individualistic, logical, rational, scientific approach to Buddhism, where it almost encourages you to pick and choose the bits you want to emphasize and what you want to most look at. So I wanted to show you these examples, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's hard to learn Buddhism in America without a teacher, because you're constantly bombarded by all kinds of quotes and t-shirts and greeting cards that they're not wrong, but they're not really giving a full picture. And so this is one of the biggest examples. People often use this quote by the Buddha as saying that he's like encouraging us to kind of be independent, experiential, and look for things that conform to logic and reason. And a lot of our logic and reason is actually flawed. And from a Buddhist point of view, we try to overcome that through the body, through quieting our minds, through chanting, through listening. So we're really trying to engage in something foreign to us, listen to ideas we've never thought of before, looking at things from a new perspective. So rather than confirming our ideas, I think the essence of Buddhism is to challenge our ideas and to get us to look at things in a new and different way. And so I think this is one of the reasons it's so important to, attend a temple, listen to teachers and priests and scholars, and read books by well-respected leaders that you can get on the internet, and just be wary of what you read. I wanted to mention too that it happens in all kinds of books. This Refuge Recovery book is an excellent book by Noah Levine. We use it here in the counseling group that meets once a month. It's an excellent book. But I was reading it last, I think maybe the 11th when I was here for their meeting before service. And on page 68, he wrote, the Buddha has been rumored to have said, we could search the whole world and never find another being more worthy of love than ourselves. I mean, that's a really good quote. And I've given Dharma talks on this before. Like, you need to be compassionate not only with others, but with yourself as well. But I think Noah Levine, I think he put this word rumored in here on purpose, because this may very likely be one of those quotes that the Buddha never said. And this happens a lot. And I try really hard to find a source. I try to use a good translation. And I try not to drop off. There may be a clause that clarifies the statement, and a lot of people will kind of drop that clause. And like in this quote, they just took out all the part about relying on your own intuition, your own logic, your own opinions. And I think the Buddha's saying we're overconfident in our views and opinions. And that gets in our way of awakening and our spiritual practice. And you don't follow the Buddha because he's the Buddha. you follow the Buddha because you see him as someone who's had an awakening experience, and he's helping you with techniques so that you could have the same experience. And of course, if you follow him for a year or two and absolutely nothing happens, then yeah, maybe you should find a different path. But you don't want to like say, oh, he agrees with me, or the Buddha's more famous than this other teacher, so I'll follow him. That's not the right way to choose. So I think a lot of us in America are a little cynical and suspicious of many different teachers. And I think the Kalama Sutra is really valuable to read. It's not that long. But I kind of feel like I was one of those in the tribe, right? I was very skittish about Buddhism. It was hard for me to go all in and really commit myself to it. I was always like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. One weekend I was really into it. The next weekend I was going to quit. So, I can identify with the Kalamas, but the Buddha's not saying, hey, John, go construct your own Buddhism, read the books that kind of agree with you and ignore the ones that don't. I think they're saying you really need to take the whole path as a package and really trust it and become a master carpenter as an apprentice. And so this is where the student-teacher relationship in Buddhism is so important. They're further on the path. They were a student once, and they can kind of help you along the way as well. Just like we learn how to become a teacher. My daughter is in student teaching now for 6 months, and my son is doing rounds as a physician's assistant. So they're both in their apprenticeship. They have doctors and senior teachers showing them the ropes, explaining them what to do, and they listen not because they agree with my kids, but because they have faith and confidence that they know what they're talking about because they're accomplished. And so Teague has great respect for the doctors and nurses he works with. They see things he can't see. He actually had 2 patients recently that he thought they were fine, and he was going to send them home. And the senior doctor said, we need to run one more test. You always have to do one more thing than you did last time. If they come back, you got to do one more thing than you did last time. And both times, they found something substantial and saved a person's life. So Teague said to himself, always do, if they come back and they still don't feel well, always do one more thing. And he said, I will never make that mistake again. And so this is how we learn. It's not that disagreed with Teague's intuition, but the doctor was right. And that happens a lot. So I guess I'm kind of promoting that American Buddhism really needs to find a Sangha and a place to practice. And it's really, really difficult to learn Buddhism by yourself, surfing the web, and reading articles that you find interesting and ignoring articles that you think are boring. You really need a program or a curriculum or some kind of organized approach to the path. And I think you can get that at Vista or OCDC, but I'm biased, very biased. So please join me in Gasho. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha.